What is the story of the cross? The story of the cross is the divine Son of God, the one worshipped by all the angels, the one who knew no sin, becoming sin for us. For cursed is everyone that hangs on the tree. The story of the cross is more than the story of nails through Jesus' hands and a crown of thorns upon his head and blood running down his face and his feet being spiked to a wooden bar. It is much more than that. The story of the cross is the story of the divine, sinless, perfect Son of God, assuming the condemnation of sin for the entire human race. A judgment bar is set up on the cross, and Christ is considered before the whole universe to be a sinner for you and me. And he experiences on that cross the death that I should have died, the death that you should have died. Not merely a physical death, but he plunges the depths of the tomb and he goes into hell itself for us as he hangs on that cross. On the cross, the guilt of sin is so great. The shame of sin is so overwhelming. The condemnation of sin that he bears for the human race is so large, so huge. All he senses on that cross is that if he goes into that grave, he will be separated from the Father forever. The separation will be eternal. And Jesus says on that cross, I would rather experience hell itself and be not in heaven with my Father if Mark Finley can be there, if John can be there, if Mary can be there. This is a love so amazing. This is a love so incredible. This is a love so divine that all I can do is fall at his feet and say, I am a debtor to grace. This is what motivated Paul. This was the passion beating in his heart. This was the fire in his belly. And this is the passion that will inspire an end-time church to go to the end of the world. The passion of the cross, the transformation of the grace of Christ. We cry out with Paul in Romans 1. Notice what Paul says. I'm in debt to the educated and the uneducated, to the rich and the poor, to the royal class and the working class. I'm in debt for all humanity. Catch a glimpse of Paul's passion for lost people. He couldn't stop telling the story. In Acts 16, he tells the story to a businesswoman in Thyatira called Lydia, and she's converted and becomes a member of ASI and uses her resources to spread the gospel. Later in the chapter, Paul and Silas sing God's grace in prison, and a Philippian jailer and his family are baptized. In Acts 17, Paul shares God's grace with philosophers in Athens, and some of them are baptized. Later in the book of Acts, he tells the story to Felix and to Agrippa, Roman rulers, and they stand there trembling before the grace of God. Paul goes to Rome, and there imprisoned, he tells the story of God's grace, and some in Caesar's household are baptized. Throughout Acts, Paul never tires of telling the story. He echoes it from Jerusalem to Rome. He proclaims it to Roman rulers and Jewish slave girls. He shares it in prisons, on ships, in marketplaces, in the countryside, in private homes, in public squares. Why? What prompts him? What motivates him? He is motivated by one thing. Not the desire to baptize more than anybody else. Not the desire to make his ministry the best, the highest, the greatest. Paul doesn't talk about himself. You read Romans, you read Philippians, you read Colossians, you read Ephesians. He is so in love with Jesus. Jesus has changed his life, and Paul says, redeemed, how I love to proclaim it. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. That's Paul, passionate about this Christ, transformed by this Christ. Did Paul have problems preaching the gospel? Why didn't he give up? What kept him going on? 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24 to 28. Here he is telling his story. Verse 24. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. Give up, Paul. This thing about preaching the gospel, talking about grace, this is tough. 5 times they beat you. Verse 25. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked, a night and a day. I've been in the deep, in journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the country. I mean, that must have been an easy life, right? In perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness, in toil, in sleeplessness, often in hunger and thirst, in fastings, often in cold, besides other things. Why did you keep doing it, Paul? What was the motivation? Why didn't you just give up? Why didn't you go home and make tents and live a comfortable life? When that living Christ enters your life, you cannot be silent. Whether you get accolades or you do not. Whether the days are tough or they are not. Whether the journey is long and the mountain is high and the road is rough, there's a passion in your life to tell the story. The world longs for an authentic representation of human life, in human life of the gospel. If you are motivated merely to make a name for your ministry, that is insufficient motivation. If you're motivated by pride, that is insufficient motivation. The cross of Christ lays the glory of man in the dust. The third angel's message says, fear God and give glory to Him. The book of Romans shares that glory is Jesus. It's the laying of all glory of man in the dust. When we don't care about who we are, but who Jesus is. When we're more concerned about giving glory to Him than we are to ourselves. When we are more anxious to glorify His name than we are our name. When we talk more about Him than we do ourselves. When we don't care who gets the glory, but we desire His work to go forward powerfully, the Spirit of God will be poured out in an amazing way on a people that are united to give Him glory. Do you have some self-centeredness still in the heart? Some pride still in the heart? You have a theological pride because you know the Word and others don't. You have an institutional pride. Because your ministry is doing so good. You have a professional pride because of academic degrees. You have a pride because you're not proud. When Jesus is a people who are broken at the cross, and all they want is what He wants. All they care about is what He cares about. All they want is to bring glory to His name and not theirs. They will be safe for Him to pour out His Holy Spirit upon, to finish His work on earth.